something that William Styron's novel did unquestionably is that it brought Nat Turner sort of into the center of our consciousness in a way that Turner had not been for many decades before that. His rebellion was remembered in its time. Then an effort was made, as so often occurs, to push this into the realm of hidden history. Styron brought it back to the center. And yes, African American writers criticized it. Other writers, both white and African American, defended it. But in either case, Nat Turner now became a major historical figure to be reckoned with, and the number of books on Nat Turner's rebellion increased dramatically. It's got a lot more attention than it had before. Then in 2016, Nate Parker, who's seen in the middle of this photograph, directed and starred in a film about Nat Turner's rebellion called The Birth of a Nation. And the title is interesting because it is a direct steal from The Birth of a Nation, the 1915 film by D.W. Griffith, which is at once recognized as a masterpiece of cinema because of the way in which he used the camera and used editing techniques and used all kinds of, basically, filmmakers then were just beginning to discover how movie making differed from simply putting a camera, facing it toward a stage where actors were acting, that you could do different things with it if you understood how to do it. And D.W. Griffith, brilliantly figured out what might be called the grammar of filmmaking. The downside of The Birth of a Nation, and it is a huge downside, is that it is incredibly racist. It's based on a novel by Thomas Dixon called The Klansman, and it presents the end of the Civil War as sort of pretty sad because the good guys lost, the Confederates lost. Really bad because all of these ignorant African Americans are now allowed to just roam free and hold public office and all kinds of things like that. And so the Ku Klux Klan has to come into play to ride in and to redress the situation. And there's a whole damsel in distress subplot. And so from that standpoint, once you get away from the art of film itself, the subject matter is very disturbing. The Birth of a Nation, in the 2016 version, was designed basically, as a head-on attack on that previous film, just by appropriating its title and taking things in a completely different direction. Now, I've seen The Birth of a Nation 3 times now, and it's, on its own terms, I think it's a tremendous film. I think it's extraordinarily effective, and I like it a lot. As a historian, I know for a fact that a lot of it is just absolutely wrong, just dead wrong. What you're looking at here is the climactic film where Nat Turner and his followers have made it to Jerusalem, which is the name of Cortland back in the day, and they are making an attempt to get at the armory where the weapons are being kept, and they're coming directly at us, the audience. But we, in this shot, we are looking from the point of view of the Virginia militia. In other words, these guys are taking on the armed might of the white South head on. Well, that didn't happen. Just didn't. And there are other issues with it that have made it problematic for a number of critics, many of them African American, who don't like the film. For instance, Leslie Alexander, she's a professor right here at Ohio State. She teaches in the Department of African and African American Studies. She talks about all the historical inaccuracies in it, but she also talks about the troubling depictions of African American women in the novel, because the movie portrays 2 key female characters being raped savagely by whites. Well, savagely in one case, and in a kind of humiliating way in the other case. And Professor Alexander doesn't like the basic way in which Black women are treated in the film, but the business about the motive for the insurrection being in the telling of the movie, the way the movie tells it, it's triggered, or it originates in Nat Turner's rage over these rapes. And Professor Alexander says of this, he says, like the film's other fabrications about Black women, the rape storyline is carefully constructed to redeem Black masculinity at Black women's expense. According to The Birth of a Nation, all of the women in Turner's life were passive victims in desperate need of Black male protection. This fabrication flies in the face of historical fact. So, all right, where am I headed with all of this? And what does this have to do with military history? Well, it has to do with history. Military history is not hermetically sealed off from political history, social history, cultural history, the history of cuisine, none of it. It's all, military history, dividing history up into themes and categories is basically a concession to our mortality. We don't have time in life to understand everything in depth. We can't be Renaissance people. There's just too much to know, and so we have specializations. But I've been a professor of military history my whole life. I mean, mostly, and I'm telling you, if you're saying this is military history, Professor Grimsley, because I know there's always somebody out there who's like that. Yes, it is, because I say so. You're saying, well, prove it. Well, give me the rest of the semester, and I will. Okay. Now, where I'm headed with this now, though, is in a direction that has to do with all history, but particularly, I would say, military history more than most. This is a statue, an equestrian statue in Richmond. It's no longer there, of one of my heroes, Robert E. Lee. I had a pretty rocky childhood, to tell you the truth. And a lot of what I learned that kind of got me through that was through reading about Civil War generals and taking inspiration from them and the way that they handled things and handled adversity and so on. And Lee was a hero of mine in that respect. He will always be a hero of mine in the sense of that particular image of Lee is, for me, heroic. But I completely agree that statue needed to come down for reasons I'll save for another time. Before we get to why it had to come down, let's look at this. History. You can have a rational argument about history. You can decide whether it was a good idea or a bad idea for General Lee to launch Pickett's charge on the third day at Gettysburg. We'll have a chance to look at that pretty soon. You can argue about any number of things having to do with Lee's military career. What you cannot argue about, though, have a rational argument about, is a person or an event that is part of a public memory. And I can only give you a first cut at what I mean by public memory. What I'm saying is that is that Lee, public memory of Lee is that of a gallant gentleman, military genius who was a person of great integrity, who was sort of a man among men, and who fought courageously and as hard as he could and with great determination until his forces in April 1865 were simply overwhelmed. And then he got together with General Ulysses S. Grant, and they made peace in a civil, decent manner that enabled the United States to begin to heal. And that after the war, he accepted defeat and modeled acceptance of it. And so in all of these respects, he is a near perfect individual, what one historian has called the marble man. Lee represents, as I've described him, represents a certain view of North and South in terms of the American Civil War. And it is a view that says that white Americans fought for different but equally valid ideas about the nature of the American Republic and the nature of the American future. And so we can honor both sides. Now, I notice I said white Americans, white Northerners, white Southerners. That's intentional, because left out of this narrative of moral equivalency is the African American experience in all of this. The experience of enslaved African Americans who found a kind of freedom at the end of the Civil War. The involvement of 186,000 African American men who wore the Union blue during the Civil War, and by the end of the war constituted fully 10% of the Union Army's strength. What happened in this public memory that emerged after the Civil War as a way of healing the two sections? I'll agree that your cause, that you fought gallantly in the cause you believe was right. If you say that I fought gallantly in a cause I believe was right, we just had different ideas about things. And oh, by the way, what a happy accident that slavery went away. But let's forget about that. It's mostly about us and our valor. That is a public memory that got put together quite deliberately after the Civil War to heal the sectional divide. And one can make an argument that for a time it served that purpose, but then it outlived that purpose and it excluded too many other Americans. I'll always admire Robert E. Lee, but I tell you what, that statue on Monument Avenue in Richmond, think about what it would be like to be a parent of, it could be anybody. I'm going to say an African American parent, but a white parent could have the same issue. You're walking along with your little kid down the street, and there's this tremendous equestrian statue, this man on a horse, and it's really exciting. And you're 5 years old, 6 years old, African American kid, and you say to your daddy, I'm a father, so I continue this way. Who is that? Who is that man? And then, well, you say, well, that's Robert E. Lee. What did he do? And this kind of thing. And you're not too far away pretty soon before you're saying, well, he fought to keep us in chains. He fought for a government that came into being for the purpose of keeping our ancestors in chains. And if he had won, we might still be in chains. Do I really want, even as someone who thinks of Lee in personal terms as a heroic figure, do I want a fellow American to have that conversation with their little girl, their little boy? To me, here's where Robert E. Lee said something that really comes into play that is valid. After the war, a mother had a new son, that she brought to Robert E. Lee and asked for some advice about how to raise him. And Lee said, teach him to deny himself. Teach him to deny himself. And one kind of self-denial, of denying ourselves, if we are white Americans white Southerners who grew up, as I did, thinking of Lee as a heroic figure and all, this Marvel man, this paladin, we have to deny ourselves that the comfort that we took in that image, in my case, because it's wrong to impose that kind of, that it's wrong to impose our needs over those of other Americans who, when you think about, where they are in American society and the issues that they must face, that's painful. That statue of Lee in Monument Avenue is painful, but you can see how contested it was. You probably were paying enough attention to seeing the struggle over the Confederate battle flag and statues like the one of Lee and others, and then people saying, "Well, you're erasing history." No, We're not erasing history. You know, I've got got about a wall unit's worth of biographies and studies of Robert E. Lee, and they're still there. And his papers are still at the University of Virginia and other places. And his battle reports and so forth are in the 128 volumes of the official records of the Union Confederate Armies. I can prove it to you. They're online as well. History has not been erased. What has happened is that a memory that was cherished for a long time was first challenged and then pushed out of the way in favor of another public memory, a public memory that brings to the center a different understanding and a better understanding. And that is of the agency, the involvement of African Americans in their own liberation, and that liberation being the central drama of the American Civil War. So I hope you understand that's the public memory thing is basically it's a different animal than history, and because it really stokes very, very powerful feelings. It's true with Nat Turner. Nat Turner has become a figure now of revolution, of just not taking, of just resistance to tyranny, resistance to this massive evil, and so he's become a touchstone for very powerful memories among far more people who know about Nat Turner now than did, thanks to William Styron's novel bringing things front and center. But that novel did its work a long time ago, and William Styron, the novelist I admire, has gone on to his reward. But yeah, okay. One last slide, and I am done. I have a documentary. It's called Nat Turner: A Troublesome Property. I found it on YouTube. You will have already seen it, perhaps, in the module. I'm giving this, recording this presentation at 12:42 on Wednesday. And yes, I know I'm way behind getting things done. You guys are behind too, so don't be too harsh with me. Anyway, I found that documentary. It's a wonderful documentary, but I didn't feel like I could make it required viewing. I'm in a position now where I have a good pedagogical reason to make it required viewing. So be sure to watch it over the next couple of days. I won't test you on it on Friday. Don't worry about that. Okay, that's for another time. But I want you to watch it, because what'll happen this week is you'll watch this documentary, and next week you're going to watch the PBS documentary on Toussaint Louverture that my other class, the one on War and World History, watched this week, and then they will watch this one. And the two classes in their own ways will then have an opportunity to compare and to contrast Nat Turner and Toussaint Louverture and the rebellions that they launched, in one case with great success, in one case with failure. And this will give us a window into talking about history in a deeper way that I think we need to do. And I'll have a video for both classes in which I explain about that. But you'll love this documentary. It's really good in some place, and it's made by Charles Burnett, who's one of the most brilliant African American directors out there. It's remarkable. So you're gonna I envy you the chance to watch it for the first time, because I've already seen it, and I'd love to have that opportunity again. Okay, that's enough for now. I will stop share and hit the little clicker, and we'll be done.